Welcome to This Week in American History, brought to you by the American Eagle Alliance. We here at the American Eagle Alliance are proud of our heritage, and we feel it's important to encourage a reconnection with that heritage, a remembrance of America the Great. And so something we provide every week is a look at some of the things that happened in American history during this week. So we're going to start off with April the 12th. Cover a wide range of things from the profound to the not so profound. But that's what America is all about, a wide range of things. We've been a great gift to the world. So let's go back to April the 12th, 1776. North Carolina issued the Halifax Resolves, the first act by a colony to authorize its delegates at the Second Continental Congress to vote for independence. Way to go, North Carolina. 1811, settlers sponsored by John Jacob Astor established the first American outpost in the Pacific Northwest. Today, it is called Astoria, Oregon. Gee, I wonder where it got its name. 1861, the Civil War began when Confederate forces bombarded Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina. 1934, for all you weather buffs, the strongest gust of wind ever recorded hit Mount Washington in New Hampshire. It registered 231 miles per hour. 1945, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt died of a cerebral hemorrhage at his home in Warm Springs, Georgia, bringing to an end the longest presidential term of office. 1981, Columbia blasted off from Cape Canaveral, beginning the age of manned space shuttles. Moving on now to April the 13th. 1613, Samuel Argall, a member of the Jamestown settlement and captain of the ship the Treasurer, kidnapped Pocahontas to use her as a bargaining chip with her father, Chief Powhatan, in order to secure the colonists' safety. They kept her under, not really lock and key, but they kept her detained at the fort at Jamestown for about a year. During that time, she studied Christianity, became a Christian, and her name was changed to Lady Rebecca. 1743, Thomas Jefferson, the first Secretary of State, second Vice President, and third President of the United States, was born in Goochland County, Virginia. Today, it is known as Albemarle County. 1860, the Pony Express finished its inaugural trip when it completed the journey from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. The trip took 10 days. 1861, Union-held Fort Sumter surrendered to Confederate forces after 33 hours of bombardment. 1970, Houston, we have a problem, was reported by astronaut Jack Swigert aboard Apollo 13 after a crippling explosion took place. Thanks to the heroic efforts of astronauts and ground crews alike, Apollo 13 and its three-man crew returned safely to Earth on April 17th, although the mission to land on the moon failed. April 14th, 1828, Noah Webster published the first edition of the American Dictionary of the English Language. 1865, Abraham Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth while watching a performance of Our American Cousin at the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. The president would die the next morning. 1956, the first commercial videotape recorder was demonstrated simultaneously at Chicago, Illinois, and Redwood City, California. And in 1981, the Columbia completed the first mission of an operational space shuttle. April 15th, 1850, the city of San Francisco was incorporated by the California legislature. 1865, President Abraham Lincoln succumbed from his head wound at 7:22 a.m. in a house across the street from the Ford Theater. A few hours later, Andrew Johnson was sworn in to be the 17th President of the United States. 1892, the General Electric Company was established. 1912, the British liner Titanic sank after hitting an iceberg. 1,514 people died. The Titanic was on its way to New York. 1955, Ray Kroc opened his first McDonald's restaurant in Des Plaines, Illinois. The real first McDonald's, however, opened in San Bernardino, California. April 16th, 1789, President-elect George Washington left Mount Vernon for his inauguration in New York City. 1862, President Lincoln signed a bill which ended slavery in the District of Columbia. And in 1912, on April the 16th, Harriet Quimby became the first woman to fly across the English Channel. April 17th, 1492, Christopher Columbus signed a contract with Spain, giving him a commission to seek a western route to the Indies. 1524, Italian navigator Giovanni da Verrazzano became the first European to sail into New York Harbor. Although he was Italian, he was exploring for France. 1861, Virginia seceded from the Union. 1961, about 1,200 Cuban freedom fighters launched the Bay of Pigs invasion in a failed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's communist regime. 1970, Apollo 13 astronauts returned safely to Earth 4 days after an onboard explosion severely damaged their spacecraft. April 18, 1775, British General Thomas Gage ordered approximately 700 troops to march from Boston to Concord, Massachusetts, in order to arrest Patriot leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock and to seize the militia's military supplies. Paul Revere and other Patriot spies learned of Gage's scheme. Despite the misperception created by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's famous poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, Revere did not respond to 2 lamps displayed in the tower of the Old North Church. No, he was the one who directed them to be placed there in order to warn other patriots in the area that the British were coming by sea, or in other words, across the Charles River. Revere then rode off, warning his countrymen that Gage's men were coming and that they should be up and to arms. Revere reached Lexington and warned Adams and Hancock, but was intercepted by the lobsterbacks before reaching Concord. A companion escaped and succeeded in warning the Patriots of Concord, and Revere was later released. When the Redcoats reached Lexington the next morning, the Minutemen were waiting, and the shot heard round the world would be fired. The success of Revere's mission can be attributed largely to the fact that Patriot spies were everywhere. We still are. The momentous events that would lead to the first firefight of the First American Revolution all started this night, April 18th, 1775. Meanwhile, in 1861, the first shots of the Civil War had already been fired April 12th at Fort Sumter, South Carolina. On April 18th, Colonel Robert E. Lee was offered command of the Union armies. That's right, the Union armies, an offer which he refused. Ironically, Lee's father had fought directly under General George Washington to establish the Union which Robert would fight to divide. Robert's father, Richard Lee, is the one who gave us the famous words about Washington, first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. 1906, the great San Francisco earthquake struck, killing an estimated 3,000 people. 1942, 16 B-25 bombers led by Lieutenant Colonel James H. Doolittle took off from the deck of the aircraft carrier USS Hornet to bomb Tokyo. And in 1978, the U.S. Senate voted to turn over the Panama Canal back to Panama by the year 2000. And that is This Week in American History.